Hi, I thought I'd talk about what we're doing in kids ministries this year. And the questions are, what are we doing and why are we doing it? Basically, we're doing two simple things and then praying like crazy that a third thing will happen. And it's pretty much things that we do all the time. We're just going to be very intentional and purposeful. The first thing is Bible. Lots of Bible. And as we go through the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, we're going to find in every story that we are reminded that God knows all about us. He knows how broken we are. He still loves us. He's redeemed us. And now He has given us work to do that will actually matter for all eternity, which is a pretty cool thing. We'll also notice as we're going through the stories that there is a big storyline that God has. He started in creation, and then there was a fall of man and woman with a promise. And then there was Israel part 1, where there's all kinds of beginnings. Israel part 2, where Israel's in the promised land. Then Israel part 3, when they were in trouble. And then God sent Jesus. Then the church began. And then finally, sometime in the future, there will be something big that happens, the new creation. So we want kids to know that God has a big story, and we are part of that story. We are an important part of that story, and we are right here. It's supposed to be a stick figure. This is where we are. And there is a mission that God's given to us, and knowing the end of the story can help us fulfill this mission now. And we'll get back to that a little bit more. But how are we going to do it? We're going to do it by two things here. We're going to be actually reading from the Bible. Imagine that. Every week, the kids will learn the story by opening up their Bibles and actually reading what's there. That's how they'll learn it and discover all kinds of things about it. Also, we're going to actually have a Bible timeline on the wall, or for kids to hold up, that they look at every week to help us remember this big story that we're all a part of. Secondly, we're going to add on, so lots of Bible, add on relationships. So I'm just going to write that down. Relationships. And that is, of course, in the church. Because we're talking about what we're doing on Sundays specifically. And so we're going to have relationships with their adult teachers, and then relationships with each other. And how we're going to do that is specifically make sure that we have time for sharing and prayer every week as part of the lesson, because that's one way you get to really know someone. And also we'll have some outside activities where kids get to know each other, to play with each other, to do some service activities, to work together. So we'll add that. So our goal is we have lots of Bible, and then we have lots of relationship building. And the statistics do show that you need to have 50% of it. You can't have 90% Bible and 10% relationships, or 90% relationships, only 10% content. You got to have 50-50 of that. That's if you want a child to really learn well. Then we're going to pray like crazy that it'll result in the kids wanting to say yes to the invitation that God gives to them every day to join His awesome mission, which is going into the world, and whatever the kid's doing, whether it's school or sports or art or music or their family or their community, and sharing God's love and finding places that are dark and bringing light to the dark places. I kind of think of this as being proactive, sharing God's love through our character and how we exhibit ourselves, how we act. That's kind of proactive. And this is more reactive or responsive, like where are the places that are dark and how can we bring light in? For example, if a kid's on a playground and they see another kid that's sitting by themselves crying because someone has said something really nasty to them, we want our kids to have the inner strength and the passion for God that would enable them to walk over to that kid and say something kind and bring light into that kid's darkness. It's kind of reactive. Of course, if it's an appropriate thing. So basically, how are we going to do this? First, we're going to actually say the mission every week. We're going to say it out loud. which is God is inviting us into his awesome mission to share his love in the world and bring light into darkness. There's something about repeating it as a group over and over again that solidifies what it is that we're here for. Then we're going to show a really funny video clip. It's about 3.5 minutes every week, which is going to be an application of the story. So we'll learn about the story, they'll read about it, they'll talk about it, and then in terms of how to apply the story, they'll have this very funny little video clip of real characters that are trying to put God's word into action. So, getting back to this, why is it important that the kids know that they are part of God's story? That's critical because our circumstances change. I kind of pull this very powerful theme. It's really out all over the Bible, but one way it comes out pretty clearly is in the story of 2 Kings 6, where you have Elisha and his servant, not Elijah, but Elisha and his servant. And his servant comes panicked, running into Elisha one morning before the sun is up and says, Elisha, Elisha. He says, I just went outside and we are surrounded by the Arameans with their horses and their spears and their helmets and their javelins, and they are here specifically to kill you, which means they're going to kill me. What are we going to do? And Elisha goes out, and the sun isn't up yet, and he sees the shadowy figures. Oh yeah, those are all the kings of Aramean, all of their soldiers. And he simply lifts up his hand to heaven, and he says, "Oh Lord, please open the eyes of my servant and help him to see that those that are with us are greater than those that are with them." And with that, Elisha's servant looks up and he sees thousands of angels coming out of heaven with gold, fiery chariots to surround them and save them. Of course, they are saved. And the rest of the story is very highly interesting with lots of twists and turns, so I recommend you read it. But basically, Elisha knew something about the future that helped him there in the present. And C.S. Lewis describes this too by talking about how in every epic story there is this ordinary person who is doing ordinary things and all of a sudden is transported to a new reality or a new world, and he joins forces with these brave and courageous and noble kings and queens who are fighting against an evil that is bigger than anything this ordinary person has ever seen in their normal life. And through valor and courage and self-sacrifice, the kings and queens, they overcome this evil for it never to be effective again. And so then they live in this peaceful, wonderful world full of joy, and then all of a sudden the ordinary person is transported back to his ordinary life. But he's different. He's changed because he has a memory of a great truth, a great beauty, a great power that will never, ever be overcome by anything evil. And it helps him to stand up straight in the world and to see things clearly and to have courage to look, to bring God's love into the world and to go into places of darkness and bring light, to be honest with their emotions but not driven by them, to be able to know that when things happen to them, that's not their story. It doesn't become their story. It's how they respond to it that becomes their story. To when someone says, oh, I don't think there's any God, I really don't, they would be able to say, wait a minute, the Bible shouts that in the beginning, God created, to really understand who they are. In Colossians 3, and I was thinking, well, I'm an ordinary person. I have not been transported to some, extraordinary world. But so what's our memory? In Colossians 3, it says, since you have been raised with Christ, set your mind on things above, on Christ who is seated at the right hand of God. And it goes on. And it's almost as if we were crucified with Christ and we were raised with Christ, and now we are living with that knowledge. And that's our memory as a believer. Personal example, when my husband and I were married, we understood, we were church planters, and we understood very clearly that our mission was to love and learn and discover more and more about God, and to flourish the church and to reach out into the world. And with all the ups and downs that comes with that kind of occupation, we would always go back to, we know what our mission is, which actually I think is everyone's mission. We know what our mission is, and we know that we're right here. And then when my husband suddenly died, I was like, And then it dawned upon me, God was giving both him and me, both he and me, a new mission. It just wasn't the same one this time. His mission was to continue to love and serve God, but in a different dimension. Mine was to stay here and to continue to love and serve God here. Now, don't get me wrong. I would give anything to have my husband back, anything. But knowing what God had called me for, and that I was part of this big story, and how knowing the end gave me strength, and gives me strength today to carry on and to do what God's called me to do, and to try to do the best I can. Some of you maybe have seen Soul Surfer. That's a movie I watched recently with my grandchildren, and that's the story of Bethany Hamilton, who in 2003, when she was only 13, she was practicing surfing, and she was already a professional surfer, and his people had I can't remember the word, but they had signed her up, and so she was she was from a Christian family. She had in her mind that this is how she was going to serve God, and sponsor, that's the word I was thinking of, and that she was going to continue to surf and be a good surfer, and she would really bring God's love into the world that way. And then one day, a shark came out of the blue and just bit her. You probably saw this in the news, and her arm was completely bitten off from here down. And the movie shows how, as a 13-year-old, she went through all of the, why did this happen? What in the world am I going to do now? Am I ever going to be able to surf again? My soul soars when I surf. Why would God be taking this away? How can it ever be used for his kingdom? Why do we even care about that? It goes through all of that. And it shows how, because of her foundation of knowing that she was God's child, she had been put here for a reason. It shows how she developed into understanding that, yes, she was still here to serve God, but it was going to be in a different way. And the rest of her story is quite amazing. But the point is, we want our kids to know this, because their circumstances will not always be the same. Right now, when their circumstances change, like their best friend's parents get a divorce, or their pet dies, or they don't make it to a sports team, or they get a terrible grade on their test, they're in families, and they're in our churches, and we can embrace them and help them and carry them. But when they're on their own, go from 18 or whenever they leave home, things are going to happen that we want them to be strong on the inside with God's strength. And that comes from knowing his big story, and how from the beginning of the world, God knew about them, and how God put them right here and has a mission for them and is going to be with them. And knowing the end of the story will help them be strong now. So that's why this powerful theme is important, and other powerful themes will unfold as we go through the rest of the stories in the Bible. So that's what we're doing this year. We are doing lots of Bible, we are building relationships, and we're praying like crazy that God will use those to help the kids say yes to his mission, to, as they go into this world, to be giving God's love and bringing light into the darkness. That's it.